Thank you guys so much for joining us. Deara had flagged this. Somebody had asked several questions. I can't remember the person. Was it Sophia or was it someone else?
It
Deara?
was Sarah from
Sarah.
Hofstra.
Yeah, asked some really great questions that made us realize, oh, we should probably do a mini presentation on best practices for sharing first draft information and also how to stay safe online, because sometimes one of those things affects the other. So I'm Amy. If you took a previous webinar, you might have met me already. I'm the Deputy Director of First Draft in the US. I work with Deara and Isabel to, I don't know, hopefully make your summer and into the election impactful and fun. Some time at First Draft. These are some of the things we'd like you to keep in mind. So your official title with First Draft, I'm gonna get out of that. Your official title at First Draft is Student Network Volunteer. So anytime you use this on your CV, and we welcome and encourage you to use this on your CV, it should be listed as a Student Network Volunteer. It should also be listed that way on LinkedIn profiles and other places where people ask you. We are across the web a lot, and if we come across issues, we will be reaching out to you directly if something doesn't correspond. So just let that be just a notice to you. And the research that you do here for First Draft is our right to publish first any material that you surface. There is a real threat of amplification. There's a real threat of something being misinterpreted. You might share something with a family member saying it's a joke, but then they don't get the joke and share it as maybe something that's real. So we really want to keep that information to First Draft first. But there are other things that you can use once we have findings surfaced and contextualized and shared within the university's channel. It can be used to support other articles and reporting that you're doing, but please credit the research to First Draft and link to firstdraftnews.org if that's possible. We have the same criteria for our staff internally and for people who are on the other Slack channels, professional working journalists who might glean some insights from us. We ask that they credit back and that we have that information on our Slack community first. If you see anything incendiary or threats of violence, please alert our team first. We will escalate it to the platforms if necessary and to the authorities. This is a big deal. We take it very seriously. There are a lot of threats, a lot of empty threats made online, but you just never know if one of those, 1 in 100 of those empty threats, somebody's going to make good on it. So it could include threatening a church, a synagogue, a person, a group of people, but we take, or at a school, but we take all of those things very seriously. And so please, please, please let us know. The other thing is just to be a good sharer of information with your fellow researchers is to put a trigger warning on any content that you think is itself triggering. Some of that could be racist content, it could be misogynistic, it could be violent. So please just give that in all caps, trigger warning and colon and what that trigger might be. And then there's an option in Slack when you post to remove the preview image. And so we ask that you do that too, especially if something is particularly gory. But that's just a way to make the environment safe and usable for everyone. And again, everybody has a different trigger. Just try and keep that in mind as you're posting within Slack. And also within any Google Doc that you might be shared with and including information there too. Are there any questions before I move on to staying safe online? All right, then I'll move on to staying safe online. This is one of my favorite topics. It is something when we ask a journalist, how do they stay safe online? There's often crickets you can hear because a lot of journalists don't stay safe online, which means that they aren't safe online, their family is not safe online, and neither are their sources. So if you can implement these very baseline habits, then we you will be a better trained journalist for the digital age. And the reason why we're talking about security is because we care about you, not just now, but really forever. Like if you can implement very basic things, I think you'll be safer online, your family will be safer online, and so will your sources. We also care about our staff. If you are exposed, you're exposing our staff, and that is just something we can't have because our staff is out there on the front lines doing a lot of work that could get them doxxed, which is a really, I've had a colleague doxxed before, and it's a really terrible experience for that person. And we had to escalate to move him offline and then look in to make sure nobody on 4chan was making threats or posting his physical address and trying to otherwise harass him. That did not stop 100 pizzas from being delivered to the office. It did not stop the police from coming to the office because they had made threats and used his phone number, and they traced that phone number back to the office. So just to say, this stuff can get very dangerous very quickly, and it's scary if it's happening to you. Keep in mind, if your sources aren't safe, if you aren't safe, your sources aren't safe. Sometimes people are like, I don't care if I'm exposed, but they care deeply, a journalist cares deeply about their sources. So if you won't stay safe for yourself, stay safe for your sources. And remember that these are very baseline tips for security. I'm not going to get into PGP or anything more advanced. You know, those resources are out there, but this is just the baseline so that you can begin to secure your network. So I've got 11 tips for you that I think should be pretty easy for you to follow, and some gifts to make this a little more exciting. So these are the easy stuff, and as you can tell from Master Skywalker here, it's no big deal. So never store passwords in a browser. Remove all passwords stored within your browsers. If you've included other browsers if you've been using other browsers in the past 5 years, clear all of those too. Where can you find this stuff? Up here in the top right corner is can you see that I've expanded my menu at the top right? Okay, yep. And so you'll go down into settings. And in the settings profile, you'll see how many passwords are stored there. You want to remove all of them. This is something that my mom does all the time. She stores all of her passwords in her browser, but I'm telling you that is the absolute wrong way to go. Please don't do that. Also remove passwords from your cell phone that might be stored. Okay, so so this is the first rule of house cleaning, is to remove all stored passwords in your browser. The next step is to go to the website haveibeenpawned.com. And it will show you if there's ever been a breach. So if you are and I used to be this type of person, I used 2 passwords for everything I ever signed into. And that was a big mistake, because there was something I signed into 4 years ago that came up under Have I Been Pawned? And there was a security breach on that website. And so my 2 passwords were then exposed. So go to that website and try and see what other websites have on you so that you can update those passwords. The other thing that you need to do on every app where you publish, that includes something like Instagram and also email. And any app where you make a financial transaction or store passwords, you want to enable 2-factor authentication. And it's that a little annoying, it can be a little annoying because you're waiting for a PIN number to come to your cell phone so that you can use that PIN number to access a website. But that extra 10 seconds of your life will be worth it, because it just keeps all of your apps and everything more secure. It's not Teflon. You know, Jack from Twitter, the CEO of Twitter, was hacked, and it was through a 2-factor authentication snafu. But you know, you guys probably don't have the profile of Jack Dorsey, so we're hoping that that provides just one extra level of security. There's an extension called HTTPS Everywhere, and so that makes a secure socket layer on any website that you go to, even if it's just a regular HTTP website. And you'll see it in domain names wherever you go. Most websites now have HTTPS, but if they don't, sometimes, especially if you're looking at disinformation actors and they're new to the game and they have a website, it might lack that secure socket layer. So you want to to use this. Sometimes it might break the look of a website or an action on a website, and you can just disable the extension, but it's a nice thing to have in your back pocket if you're going around the internet. The other thing that I really recommend is using browsing an incognito. Again, that's under the 3 dots here, and it says new incognito window, and it allows you to browse anonymously. This was, for years, this was a workaround for people who didn't want to buy a subscription to something like the New York Times, but the New York Times has gotten wise to that. You can no longer do that, but we recommend you do that, especially when you're going into message boards like 4chan and using aliases. We recommend using only Chrome and Firefox. There's 2 reasons for that. One, they both store extensions. So if I'm working on my laptop right now and then I go into work and I'm on my desktop computer, if I'm logged into my browser, all of those extensions follow me. So you don't have to re-upload and resubscribe, and especially if on an extension that saves your previous searches and your internet path, it will come up again. So that can be really, really helpful. Also too, most extensions, or the most robust suite of extensions, are for Chrome first and Firefox second. Some people like Firefox more than Chrome because it was created, it's not an open source, but it's created by Mozilla, and Mozilla is kind of seen as better actors of the internet than Chrome, which is owned by Google. I just have been deeply wedded to Google platforms, and so I end up using Chrome a lot. So I'm not stumping for either one, but those are kind of the divide, but that's the reason why we recommend one or the other. Safari doesn't have nearly the extensions or the security that something like Firefox has, or the usability that Chrome has. So I included this GIF because LastPass changed my life, and I will show you how, but I'm really excited about LastPass. It is a pain in the butt. It is a Saturday or Sunday morning where you are going to start updating your passwords, but I'm telling you, it's worth it, and it did change my life. So the first thing though, before we do that, is go on an adventure. What do I mean by that? I mean that at your university, somewhere probably on the 6th or 7th page in your IT department's suite of offerings, you're gonna have to dig deep, they will offer you access to a VPN and access to LastPass, possibly, or some kind of password manager. I use LastPass because it was free at the time, and then I worked for a university where they gave it to us for free as well. So again, buried 7 pages in our free university resources. LastPass is a password blocker. And what that does is it allows you to have really complicated passwords for websites that you're going to, and you don't have to store them all in your head. I think one of our coworkers uses Movie Lines for all the websites that he goes to. The problem is you're probably going to go and log into about 40 websites a day, so you've got 40 movie lines to memorize every time and to figure out which one you used. So I use a free password generator. I think it's called I'll share that with De'Ara, but it's a free password generator. You want to use it when you can, 16 characters or more. It doesn't matter if the password is super complicated. What really matters more is that the password is long, and that is less hackable. And what LastPass does is it stores all of your passwords. So for instance, I have all of my business and finance stuff, like my personal finance stuff, in a folder. I have all of my travel things in a separate folder, and I can organize them in that way. We also have a premium LastPass account at First Draft, so we're able to share like shared social profiles, passwords through that as well. You might not need that, but it's something to think about. And what it does is, if you can see over here on the left-hand side, I'm trying to log into the New York Times website, and there's, when you are logged into LastPass, and you can see up here, this is the LastPass login. It's yellow, which means I have to update my password for there. But this is where my LastPass extension. And here, a similar icon populates here and here. And whenever you are logged into your LastPass through your extension, these passwords will populate. Your username and password will populate anytime you need to log in. So it's going to save a lot of headspace. It's going to save a lot of heartache. You want to have, especially on your banking accounts, your social profile accounts, you want really complicated passwords. LastPass also offers, not to do too big of a sales pitch, but it also offers an app for your phone, and I use that all the time on my phone as well. And it also has a two-factor authentication that you can create for websites that don't require that. So it's a nice additional companion app for those two things. But this, if you can devote a Saturday morning to making really long, strong passwords for every site you've ever logged onto in the world, I think you will be you'll be safer online, and you won't have to store all those passwords in your head. Because right now there's a lot of things to log into, and we take shortcuts through that, and which is what my earlier shortcut was 2 passwords that I used always, and now I've gotten away from that, which is really great. The other thing that we recommend is a virtual private network. As I mentioned before, somewhere buried deep in your university IT page is likely a free or an offer, if you're a student, to have a free VPN. Download this tool. It's going to really be helpful for you. You can also use a VPN on your smartphone, and these come in handy if you're traveling. I mean, not a lot of us are traveling, but maybe you're using friends' Wi-Fi now. Airports, hotels, airplanes, all of that stuff could leave your information exposed. And what this does is it scrambles your signal. So basically, people don't know what you're looking for. Right now, as I'm talking to you, I have a VPN working. I'm based in Indiana. I'm on my mom's network, which has a cute little password to it relating to her grandchildren. But I don't think that I'm poised for being hacked, and yet I still want to protect my information. So even if you're at home, I really recommend you using a VPN, especially if you're working on first draft stuff, and especially if you're going into more problematic parts of the internet. So 4chan, I think it doesn't work when you're going to Discord. There are places where VPNs won't work, and that's when you want to use a browser in incognito. But on places, VPN also doesn't work on like banking sites, for example. But on places where, and you'll notice right away, like things will just slow down and then won't, and the page won't load. But as much as you can, use a VPN. I have mine set up so that as soon as I start my computer up for the day, it logs in automatically. So it's like I don't even have the opportunity to be a bad actor. It just happens to populate, which is really helpful, I think. So on times when you're unable to use a VPN because it's blocked by Discord or banking sites, you can turn to Tor, which is a free and open source browser that enables anonymous and protected communications. So it's got this little this little icon for its logo. You can also, I use Tor, the Tor browser sometimes, and I also use it on my phone. If you're using your smartphone, and a lot of us are, you can download that browser. But it's it can be really helpful. There's when people talk of the dark web, they're talking about Tor, because there are lots and lots of pages and ideas that are not really possible to exchange on the open web. So this is where they're talking about. So just tread cautiously and carefully. So I'm going to just take a sip for a second. We get asked a lot on our team and a lot in trainings, like what should I post on social media and how should I post on social media? And it really comes down to this is why it's in the security section and not in the beginning section of like rules of the road for first draft. It is a matter of personal security of what you share online. And anything that you put on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, you are publishing. That is an act of publishing. So keep that in mind when you are posting. If you're making a grand claim, if you're appearing to be, or if you are too partisan, even your likes can and may be used against you by a bad actor. And what I mean by that is, let's say you do a report on the far right and they don't like it. they will coordinate a campaign to dig into your background and see where your weaknesses are. And you really just want to keep your cards close to the vest if you can. Some people feel like that, you know, it's my right to say it, but just know your likes, your dislikes, your comments will come back to haunt you. What we saw recently when Twitter put a label warning on May 28th to a tweet of Donald Trump's, the head of policy, one of the heads of policy at Twitter was exposed. So he had about maybe 20 tweets that showed that he was left of center for sure, and called Trump and his people in his administration Nazis. And, you know, I don't know if he still has a job at Twitter, but it's one of those things that's very destabilizing. And I can imagine his life was hell for about a week. So just keep that in mind. Everything you put out there adds to more information for people to collect and to be used against you. So I'm kind of, I've been reluctant to post a lot of opinion on Twitter. I usually post like, oh, this cool thing is happening, or, and I, you know, I think I betray my political leanings certainly in my likes, and I know that, I'm aware of that, but just, I don't want you guys to think that, that those things are private, even if you have your channel somewhat shut down. Those things are out there and they could and may be used against you. The last thing I want to mention is when you're home next, maybe you're all at home, I am, is to assist your family members in closing down their settings. There are about 4 places on Facebook where you can close down settings. Your likes are separate to your personal settings. So likes, to shut down your likes, it's under the drop down more. And it's not very transparent how to shut that down. The best way to see if your account is shut down is to have somebody who is not your friend look to see how much they can find online. I had a colleague say, oh, all my stuff is shut down. And I was like, I can see all your photos. And she was like, what? And so it wasn't until I showed her what I could see that she was really surprised by that. Another colleague of mine asked if he could use my Facebook likes, if he could scrape those for a demonstration in a class. And I said, well, mine are locked down. You can't see them. He's like, oh no, I can see them right away. And so then I went on, I said, sure, let me know when you're done and then I will close them down. Every platform has its quirks on what can be, what and where to shut down what you expose. And Facebook is probably the quirkiest of all of them. Just to keep that in mind. Again, those things could be used against you. And if your mom's settings are wide open, then that means you are wide open on that platform too. So be smart, be safe, and let me know if you have any questions. Again, this is just sort of a baseline for what you should do for keeping yourself safe online, and that there's more advanced tips for sure. But if you can start with these, it might make you curious for other things and see how far you can push this in terms of safety and security for yourself, for your family, and for your sources. Thank you.
I have a question. Thank you so much for that. It was really helpful. And sorry if you hear some background noise. My family's still navigating this whole, all 5 of us working from home in a small apartment. So I apologize in advance. But so there have been a few times where, mostly on Twitter, some of the more outrageous tweets tend to have a link to an article from a random publication that makes me a little nervous just in terms of like ads and viruses. At what point is it like not worth further exploring something that looks like mis or disinformation because it looks like it could have a virus or impact our computer in some way?
Yeah, if it's like a phishing attempt, right? Or some kind of phishing scheme. I mean, you could certainly, I would right click and open that in incognito browser window. I would make sure my VPN is on anything. Email is trickier. So like, I would say you never want to click on anything that's sent in an email, but it can be opened through PGP. If you, our colleague Keenan showed us how to do that. I don't remember PGP in order to train you on that, but I know that it can be done, and that's how people open emails more securely and safely, and can click on things more securely. But those are the two things I would recommend doing. And, you know, there's a lot you can do without clicking on the link. You can go into DNS info to try and find out who owns that. You could also use the URL and put it into Google and see what comes up, like our other websites pointing to it. If you go into Facebook, does the same URL, like let's say it's like organicfoodproducts.com. If you plug in organic food products as one word, is there a page on Facebook about that? Do they have a LinkedIn profile? There's a lot you can do without having to click on the domain name itself that you can search for online and see what comes up. You might also too, if like Google comes up with like 40 pages, you might want to skip to page 40 to see what comes up at the bitter end. Sometimes the really crappy stuff is at the end of the Google search because Google's trying to think like, what are your, you know, I've seen Sophia's search before and I know she likes brown shoes. So I'm going to make sure that the brown shoes come up first and the red shoes are on the page 40. But maybe you're like, I want to see what those red shoes are first, you know, then you would go to page 40 for an example.
Thank you so much. That was helpful. I'm going to run now to go to my orientation, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Have a good summer, CBS.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye, guys.
All right. Well, unless Chase has questions or dear Isabel, you guys have anything you'd like to add I might have missed?
No, I think honestly you covered it really well, and I'm glad that you mentioned the social media aspect of, you know, what you like versus how visible you are and all those different access points that people can have. If you're not aware of them, then yeah, it's something that you need to take into account. Yeah,
I mean, when we hold our smartphone, it's almost like it's this very intimate love affair we're having, and we think, oh, I'm posting on Instagram to just people who I like. But if your settings are open or you use a particularly trending hashtag, then you're going to get a lot of other people who might not have otherwise seen you. So, you know, it's a level of exposure that I think we forget when we're on our couch reclined and enjoying what our friends are posting. I'm also constantly amazed at how often how unclear I can be on social media when I think I'm being very clear, and how people misinterpret what I say or like come after me because of an opinion. I was like, it's just an opinion, like everybody's got them and you just don't have to agree. But, you know, people do come after you, and it's, you know, I don't say anything too polemic, but like, you know, anyway, and watch the cuss words, because when I'm telling you, when we are hiring at First Draft, we go through people's social profiles. We don't do a deep dive, but we do look to see, like, are they cussing? How do they comport themselves? Because it might indicate how they would comport themselves at an in-person training or a summit or a conference. You know, we want to make sure that we have good stewards. So all of those things add up to who you are. So scrub your profiles, people. I don't want to see your party pics from junior year in college.
Very true. Very important. Excellent. Looks like we're coming up right at 12:30.
Great.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing all that important information, and this will be made available if anybody needs a recap.
Great. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.